So today's topic is successfully dealing with the Gen Z generation in the workplace. This is all about responsible leadership, and responsible leadership is about striving to become a better person, behaving responsibly towards your colleagues, and making your companies and organizations thrive by developing sustainable business opportunities to solve the challenges of today's world. For this, we are joined by Mmeme Best-Agbi for this presentation, followed by the reflection of Racheal Olowoshile. Mmeme is a certified HR leader with nearly 2 decades of experience leading people strategy, organizational transformation, and workforce optimization. With an engineering background and a career defined by impact, Mmeme brings a rare blend of analytical precision and people-centered leadership to HR. And her expertise spans strategic workforce planning, talent acquisition and retention, digital HR transformation, leadership development, and organizational design. Racheal Olowoshile is the Group Head Legal Services at Providus Bank, where she shapes legal strategy and supports operational growth. She brings a strong background spanning HR and organizational strategy, enabling her to integrate talent, risk, and governance. Racheal is a trusted partner to senior leadership and leads her team with clarity and impact. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We will come back to your questions during the Q&A, which will be after the presentation and the reflection. Mmeme, over to you.
Thank you very much. And good morning, everybody. So without wasting any time, I see we have just a very short time to be exploring this topic. We would be exploring how to successfully deal with Gen Z in the workplace. So this topic is trendy and it's actually timely because the Gen Zs, defined as people that practically joined the workforce just before COVID, born between 1997 and 2012. Since they got into the workplace, we have seen they came in with an impact. They actually had transforming our workplaces with their fresh perspectives, with their bold expectations, actually. And also being digital natives, they brought on board their digital fluency. And as leaders, the question isn't whether or not we are ready for Gen Z. They're already in our workplaces. So what we should be discussing is what we're actually discussing today. And it is how to harness their energy, their ambition, and their values to build workplaces that are successful and thrive. And actually, the future of our organizations today and in the future will depend on how well we successfully deal with the Gen Zs, how well we understand them, engage them, and actually empower them. So let's get right into it. Per data, we've been told that by the end of this year, that 27% of the global workforce would be Gen Zs. And when I saw this data, I had to go back to my own organization's data and to check. And what I found was that a lot of other organizations, including mine, have already exceeded this. We already have majority of our workforce that are Gen Zs. So I think it's dependent on industry and the climate. That is how we know, but they're already with us. So the question is, how do you keep track how large or small your Gen Z workforce is, and what have you put in place? If your organization hasn't created a plan to attract them, to engage them, and to keep them, then now is actually the time. So if we haven't done that, thankfully we are here. So we will discuss and we will learn one thing or the other from this session. I had to share a company in focus, which actually the organization that I work in. And we found just this year, we've been keeping data, but being more intentional, we found that we actually have 67% of our workforce that is Gen Z. And that brought to bear some of the issues we've had, just before COVID and post-COVID with employee issues. And we've also found that they are slowly but surely becoming even part of our management team. So with the non-management, they're actually about over 90%, but we have a fraction of them that are now in even leadership positions in our organization. And we've had over time that leaders kept complaining, they're already complaining and trying to wish away, Gen Zs, but unfortunately they are here to stay. Many leaders have reported difficulties with working with Gen Zs. Some of them are just perception that, oh, Gen Zs, they are not ready to work. Oh, they lack communication skills. They don't know how to talk. They lack work ethics. They are very difficult people to manage. And sometimes we've had situations where leaders have actually fired the Gen Zs shortly after hiring them, or the Gen Zs just abscond on their own. They leave the workplace they just ghost you, even at pre-hiring stage. It's more common with this generation to ghost employers. And with all of these challenges, the first things first in actually knowing how to deal with them is to even understand beyond the stereotype what actually has made this generation different. If we don't understand it and we are just putting them in a box and understanding the why, we may not be able to actually deal with them successfully. So I call them actually the benchmark generation, because really the Gen Zs are just, the things they have said, they are just the bold version of the previous generations in the workplace. What they are saying is they are not necessarily new things. They are only just voicing out what every other generation has always wanted. They are not afraid to make their demands. And also, what also makes them different is that they're actually the least resilient. And there's a reason for that. They are less equipped to deal with stress. And that's why you hear them talk about mental health issues. You find that they have high anxiety. And these issues stem from the time that they were born. They were born at the time of technological advancements and heightened awareness, both on social issues, mental health issues. They were born into social media and they're exposed to a whole lot of things. So this unique upbringing is what has shaped their view about relationships, their view about work, their view generally about the world. So the influence from social media and what has been termed safetyism from the Nigerian context. The Gen Zs are brought up by millennials and Gen Xers mostly. And it's most times they are working families, both mother and father are working, trying to protect their children from the things that they didn't get or the things that they didn't grow up with. So there's the over-sheltering of the children, being overprotective, protecting them from the dangers, because you hear a lot of things. You sit down in a Port Harcourt, you're hearing how there are security issues in another country. You are hearing about wars, rumors of wars, several things. And the influence of having access to this huge amount of data has also made parents to try to shield their children. And that has made them least resilient, because when they eventually have to stand on their own, they don't have that resilience that previous generations were exposed to. So this has affected the Generation Z tremendously. So as they enter the workplace, they are entering with this challenge. They are also very ambitious by nature, because again, they were born into a world where they have access to data. They have access to information. They can see what people of their age are doing worldwide, and they can aspire. So they kind of grow up with that confidence. And sometimes they are very confident at expressing confidence that they do not have, really. Very ambitious. They want to make money quickly. They want to be CEOs of their business. So by their very nature, because of the time that they were born, they are very ambitious. And they are also very entrepreneurial. They don't keep in one job. You see people doing side hustles before they even finish school. They're already doing things, working online, making money, earning in foreign currencies. They are bringing up startups. They want to do their own business. Some don't even want to go to school. They think education is a waste of their time, and they try to get money, and they're seeing their mates do these things in other climes, and it inspires them to be entrepreneurial. These are the people that are entering our workforce. They are also very outspoken, and funny enough, it's contradictory because they are also confrontation avoidant. That's why you would see them ghost you. They will just up and leave without giving you feedback. And maybe they will just go post it on social media how there's a terrible boss or a terrible culture in our organization, rather than have a one-on-one and have conversations. They quit. They are not afraid to quit, but they can be outspoken, but in a non-confrontational manner because they have various other communications. So they either email you or they go post it on their status, their WhatsApp status, on their social media. They wouldn't talk to you and find a solution. They just quit. And by the very time that they are born, they're also very globally conscious. They are active, almost saying activists by nature, because you can see what's happening around the world. The Generation Zs are speaking up against bad governance. They are speaking up against bad leadership, both in the workplace and even in the larger society. So they are activists by nature, and they bring that into the workplace. And because also of social media influence, they are very dependent on validation. They need frequent or instant feedback. Social media today, they see instant. It looks like people are succeeding overnight, and that's all they know because they grew up into that. So they believe that if they come to the place of work, they resume today, and in 3 months they want a raise. They are already telling you the money that they agreed and signed up for is not enough. They want a promotion. The anxiety, the validation, all of these things put together has made Gen Z seem or perceived to be entitled or to be difficult to manage. But the good news is that there are ways to deal with them. And for starters, I would always say start with empathy. You have to understand what makes them different. And let's dig a little bit deeper. When it comes to Gen Zs, when we say they have a sense of entitlement, and even the self-confidence that they seem to have, which sometimes is false, and it's just a max for the insecurity or is like their coping mechanism sometimes. That's what their confidence is about. You have to dig a little bit deeper to understand that the life that they have grown up in is different from the life that we generation, the millennials, the Gen X, the baby boomers, is so different from the life that we grew up in. And when we understand that, it's easier to deal with them. And they're also coming into the workforce at a time that success stories are posted real time, people are praised real time. It creates a narrative that success is instant and is visible to everyone. They were raised, or they are being raised in a world where accomplishments are celebrated publicly. They think there are no behind the scenes struggles. They don't understand failures. They don't understand that there's a lot of work that goes on behind before the success that you see. And sometimes when they come into the workplace, they come in with that approach, which is misinterpreted most times as an entitlement. They come in and they expect you to recognize them for the contributions that they are making almost immediately, even, quicker than older colleagues who may have been there older than them. So, and that's because of their constant exposure to social media and the digital stories where people gain fame overnight, gain recognition, can gain thousands of followers overnight. So that's the world that Gen Zs are growing up in, and they come into the workplace with that. And because of this, they are prone to struggle with mental health because they have put on pressures on themselves and expectation. And it's very important that leaders approach them with understanding and compassion. They've never known a world without smartphones, without social media, without instant access to information. They are used to a very instant feedback loop where they post something on Instagram and they are getting feedback, they are getting likes, they are getting all of that. And then they come to the work environment where they are not seeing that recognition. It's very traditional, and they don't seem to fit. It's almost like a mismatch. So if If as an organization you understand this, we would then put in place as high priority their mental well-being. Support them by giving them access to counseling that's without stigma, establishing employee assistance programs like employee resource groups, different to meet the needs of the employees, and as much as possible, promote work-life integration so that there's a bit of a balance. And how to do this practically is by prioritizing also, how will I put it? Prioritizing these things, putting in place, giving them access. Even from your health insurance schemes, you can actually engage organizations, and the investment, you'll be shocked, is not that significant, but you'd be attracting Gen Zs into your organization if they know that mental well-being is paramount in the organization. That's one practical way to actually deal with them and retain them. Then also, they were born into technology. So if your organization is still doing things manually and all of that, you will lose them. You have to invest in the latest technological tools so that things that will take 1 hour to do in 2 minutes, in 5 minutes, it's done. They can move on to other things. So investing in these things are important, because manual and mundane tasks, I know Gen Zs have a very low tolerance to outdated tools, inefficient tools. They would appreciate an organization that actually has technological tools in place that make them more productive. Then again, another very important practice that we could also imbibe is building an active listening strategy. Providing various feedback mechanisms where they can get feedback instantly, regularly, and then acting on this feedback. They can give you feedback, you can give them feedback. That way, we are building a very responsive work environment that actually shows that we genuinely want to engage and inspire them. These things that they are looking for, it's things that older generations actually would love, but it has become more paramount now because the Gen Zs have bolder expectations and are speaking out and are making their demands. So if your organization hasn't had an active listening strategy, have one where different ways to communicate, not just via email, through tools, through either anonymous or non-anonymous. Let it be very easy for them to give feedback, especially as they are confrontation avoidant. You don't expect that they will call you or they would, try and get a one-on-one with you as a leader. Give them opportunity to drop that feedback, using other communication channels. And then again, moving on from the listening strategy, flexibility. And what I would say is flexibility can take more than one form. Some organizations may be able to afford certain extent of flexibility than others. But the most important thing is where they work. In some organizations, in-person is paramount because of the nature of services that they give their customers. So the other question is, how do you make that in-person experience one that the Gen Z employees, your younger employees, find it exciting to come to work? They are not struggling with waking up and reporting at work. That's one of the questions we must ask ourselves today. Where they work, as part of flexibility, when they begin their work day, depending on the kind of setting you have, is something that leaders need to start to consider. Is there a need to be a bit more flexible as to when people begin their work day? How does it affect the impact on customers? How does it affect the service that we render? And all of that, putting everything into consideration. How do you give them more control? Because flexibility is also about giving them more control and autonomy over the work that they do. So even if your organization cannot afford remote work or a hybrid work, you have to now ensure that you're in person, you create an office that your people are very excited to come in person. You make that option, if that's the only option you have, to be more appealing. And one way some organizations do that is providing free food. If they know that they will save money on food or save time on food, and they know that at work they will get a decent meal, and they know at work there are social events that happen from time to time, they know that at work there are employee-driven initiatives that either bring them to the office, get them to bond with other colleagues. Those are the things that will make work more interesting for Gen Zs. And that's how flexibility can happen. So don't think when we hear flexibility, it's not just about giving remote work, because not all organizations can afford that. The next one is establishing consistent recognition initiatives. That way you feed their need for validation. And you can have internal recognition platforms and social engagement tools within the organization. Can build one bespoke or even leverage off-the-shelf legacy systems. Like I think Microsoft has one. It's like an internal social system, a Viva Engage, where it's like social media, but within the workplace. It can interest your employees. You can use that for recognition, can use that to praise, like, comment, they post, make posts, but it's within your own organization. That's also one way to retain Gen Zs. And finally on this, one other way is to show them a way that they can grow within your organization. Before now, our parents, other generations took pride in staying in an organization for 20 to 35 years in service. But Gen Zs just see a job as a stepping stone to where they want to go. You need to be able to convince them that your organization is a place to stay and achieve their ambition. You need to inform the employees, because if you give them the information on their career path, they know that they can get the development. They know that they can actually achieve their ambition if they're a little bit patient, if their anxieties are being managed, when promotion criteria are communicated, when they have mentorship, they have leaders that inspire them in the system, they would want to stay. Informed employees are likely to stick around. So the questions in wrapping up, to ask yourself as a leader that has Gen Zs on your team, how can I provide my young employees with the flexibility they need to do their work best? Remember, it can take various forms. Again, how can I create an office or in-person experience that young employees are excited to take part in? They got into the workplace around COVID, so they were used to remote and hybrid. But based on data, we are seeing that they appreciate organizations that allow them to come in and are exciting places to work in, because they are beginning to realize that even their mental health may be taking a toll on them without having that in-person bonding. Another question to ask is, how can I provide my young employees with the tools they need to achieve their ambitions? So as leaders, we need to figure out these answers and figure out what works best for organization. It is not a one size fits all. And to wrap up, as we wrap up, I'm reminded of a recent conversation I had with one of my young Gen Z colleagues, and he shared how much it meant to him that his ideas were genuinely heard and acted upon. And even though they were new in the team, he has seen the impact. He's seeing that he's able to give an idea, it's approved, it's implemented, and just that simple act of listening made all the difference in their sense of belonging. He had concerns here and there, but just the simple act of listening may have been the game changer. So, as leaders, we need to commit. Yes, Gen Zs, they have maturing, they need to mature, but we need to actually commit to leading them with empathy, understanding, and then responding to their priorities, the things that are important to them, responding to them in the manner that brings out the best in them. So I'm challenging all of us today. Let's be the leaders that would inspire the Gen Zs to bring out their best, because in doing so, we are actually unlocking a workplace that will thrive. And organizations that are intentional about this going forward will be the ones that would actually remain relevant over the next decade. And hopefully all of us in this room would take one or two things out of here and go back to organizations and implement. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Jean, you're muted.
Thank you. I hope I stayed within time. Oh,
It's fine.
Oh.
It's fine. You've exceeded it today.
okay.
Jane, I think you are muted. If you can hear. All right.
Yes. Rachel, are you ready to give us your reflections, please? And by the way, thank you very much, Mmeme, for what is very topical, very real for all of us, and a very interesting conversation starter that you've given us, and good points to reflect. If I can ask Rachel to do the reflection for us.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Mmeme. It was a wonderful presentation. From the graph that was displayed during the presentation, it is clear that Gen Zs will top the charts in the next 10 years globally at the workplace. This means other workforce generation will be thinning out in size as the years go by. It is only an organization that is forward-looking or future-forward that will be able to attract talents and retain them within this demography. From the presentation, what resonates more with me is the stereotypical way organizations relate and perceive Gen Zs. There needs to be a total paradigm shift. Organizations must be intentional about incorporating Gen Z's expectations in their policies, their processes, their value propositions. This would shape the culture of these organizations. To achieve a collaborative workforce where employees, including Gen Zs, are motivated, the HR and managers have roles to play. Okay, for HR, for HR, organizational policies, processes must be reviewed to incorporate the expectations of Gen Zs. This will require deliberate efforts to study and understand the Gen Zs, their needs, their expectations, and generally how they think and why they act the way they do. I know Mmeme had mentioned some of this, you know, the experience, their experiences, their upbringing, their education, they are very tech savvy. All of this would have to be put in place for us to be able to, for organizations to be able to tweak their policies in such a way that it is all inclusive. Secondly, policies and processes flows into organizational cultures. Where these are properly drafted, the gap between Gen Zs and other generations in the workplace will be bridged considerably. I want to believe that the issues that we have today in workplaces flows from the relationship between Gen Zs and other generations in the workplace. You know, and so if the culture of the organization is worked on or reviewed, which flows from the policies and the processes of the organization, maybe value proposition and all of that, that talks about teamwork, I know the gap will be bridged considerably. Then for managers, they must make concerted efforts to assign tasks to Gen Zs and take the backseat, allowing them to come up with innovations, guiding them by having frequent review sections, celebrating small wins as they go along, and also giving appropriate feedback. I know for Gen Zs, one thing they don't like is being micromanaged. They don't like being micromanaged. So we can, as managers, we can give them tasks that would make them bring on board their innovations, but we would not leave them just hanging. We would, from time to time, call for a review session and, where they had done things well, we should give them a pat on the back and also encourage them to do more. Secondly, Gen Zs do not like stagnancy. I think Mmeme mentioned it. They don't like stagnancy. They want to be engaged. So giving, like I said, assigning tasks directly to them is one way, and also putting them in teams, maybe project teams, where they can showcase their innovations, the innovations they have, what they have to bring on the table is another way to ensure that they are properly engaged in an organization. Then thirdly, like I said, shaping organizational culture to support collaboration and inclusiveness will help bridge the gap between Gen Zs and other generations, making it a win-win outcome for the team and the organization. So organizational culture would help ensure and enforce that there's collaboration between everyone in a team. And it would also help ensure that the relationship between team members and that of the managers are properly aligned, where there are no issues, or even if there are issues, there are ways, there are stated ways or agreed ways of resolving issues. This will help forestall any issues that the Gen Zs may probably have, and help them and keep them motivated as well. So in conclusion, the Gen Zs are here to stay. The early organizations are deliberate about integrating them in the workplace. The better positioned they will be to show up, increase and maintain their performance in coming years. Thank you.
You're muted, Jane.
Thank you, Paul. We all need a Paul on a call like this, right? Thank you. Racheal, thank you very much for those reflections, and also Mmeme for your insightful discussion today. I think it's something many of us can relate to. I'm just keeping an eye on some of the comments and the questions here. Let me have a look here quickly. There's a comment from Brian, Mmeme, that says, firstly, thank you for the presentation, which was enlightening. It feels this is a really misunderstood concept in the workplace. Would you recommend any articles or books, any material that one can read up on this subject? Any recommendations, perhaps, for people who want to learn or find out more?
What comes to my mind quickly is there's a leadership expert, Simon Sinek. If you follow his podcast, you would find that he has spoken about this subject extensively. So you might want to read, Simon Sinek. I don't have specifics, but if you go online and check out his podcast and some of his YouTube videos, you would be able to learn a lot more about leadership generally, and specifically how to lead the Gen Zs in the workplace. I hope that's useful for you, Brian.
Thank you, Mmeme. There's another comment here that says, finding the balance in giving them a conducive environment that suits them, the Gen Zs, and a place to help them develop more maturity and character is key. So that's the comment from Olabisi. The question I'll put to you is, Gen Z often challenges the way things are done, or things have always been done. And maybe from your experience, how can leaders turn that kind of questioning into collaboration rather than tension in the work environment?
So it first starts with understanding where they are coming from. And that's why when I was talking about how to, best practices, I first started with empathy. don't understand where they are coming from and the world that they have grown up in. That's just the way they are. You can harness that. So it's just a mindset shift to say, no, this is not an attack on my person. This person is, you know, you may say it's too forward, it's overconfident. Why is he coming to me? You are not used to that because maybe as a leader in the workplace, you are used to people saying yes, sir, every time, people not questioning your decisions. And then you find these young kids on the block now questioning and trying to find out. That's their curiosity. That's because they have access to a lot of information and data, and they may be right. So let's just pause and listen. And next time a Gen Z questions you or is perceived to question you, you remember to pause, listen, understand where they are coming from, and then you can now react or respond to their questions, give feedback on, and you may learn a thing or two from them, really. They bring in a lot of fresh perspective in the workplace, different from what we are accustomed to. So we need to actually adapt to be able to manage them effectively.
It's food for thought, Mmeme. Thank you. Thank you for that. There's a question here that reads, what role, and this is from Don Bosco Gama, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Don Bosco. What role does technology play in managing and communicating with Gen Z workers? Let me just, sorry, it's bounced. Let me just go back there in 1 second. I just lost that. Here we go. I'm going to read it again. What role does technology play in managing and communicating with Gen Z workers? And how can organizations create a workplace culture that supports Gen Z's expectations for flexibility and purpose-driven work? How would you comment on that?
Gen Zs are digital natives. They grow up with technology. So technology plays a huge role if you want to get through to them in managing and in communicating with them. So you must ensure that the technology you have does not frustrate them. Remember, they have the least resilience. They get easily frustrated. They can't deal with mundane and, you know, repetitive tasks that they know that can be done a lot easier. So by engaging them, they could suggest, they could bring off stuff, and you'll be shocked at how low-hanging fruits in terms of technology that are not so expensive. Sometimes we perceive the technology as, oh, it may be too expensive. But when you realize that you have people in your workplace, a significant amount, you know, of your workforce need technology to survive, need technology to actually be productive, then you should prioritize that. So it plays a huge role in managing their expectations. And then again, if your organization is able to give them flexibility in terms of when they work, where they work, then technology is your best bet in managing that that kind of work environment.
Lovely, thank you. Paul, may we field 2 more questions, please? Does time allow for us to do 2 more?
Yes, we can take 2 more questions.
Thank
we
you
also
very
have
much.
a question in
Thank
the
you.
Q&A section.
Thank you. Mmeme, a question from Omalara Akanji. Firstly, thanking you for the beautiful presentation about the Gen Z. Omalara goes on to say, and there it bounces again. Oh, let me just find it. 1 second.
I think I can see it. So it says, how could we help the older generation to keep working on their moods at work?
Thank you. Lovely.
Okay. It first starts with understanding. So we need to, as a matter of urgency, keep this topic going and top burner in our organizations, where we are educating the older generations about the Gen Z. Some of them have these Gen Zs as kids at home, right? But when they come to the workplace, they just all of a sudden just expect that the Gen Zs would adapt to the work environment. This way, there has to be an adaptation from the organization as well. So there has to be education, rehash. This kind of discussions need to be ongoing so that the older generations now understand that these are the people that if they are here to stay, you can't wish it away, and find a balance in working on their moods and stuff. And then there's something I've learned recently, something I'm reading on currently. It is the impact, because these Gen Zs were born to working parents, both mother, both father. And there's a science to prove that even though with the feminist movements, women being at work, had a positive impact on the world, it actually had negative impact on raising kids. So we have raised kids that have grown up with anxiety problems. We have raised kids that are prone to mental health issues. So it starts from the home, how we are more intentional about raising the next generation, so that when they grow and have to be in the workplace, we are able to manage them better. So these older generations are parents too. And even if they don't have kids, they grow up in a family, with other people, and they should be able to understand that this new generation is bringing their whole self to work, and the organization and the leadership and the older generation needs to, as a matter of urgency, learn how to manage that and groom them better to actually adapt better to the workplace. I hope, Omolara, I've been able to clear that for you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mmeme. Lastly, I'll field this one from Don Bosco Gama. How can managers, and I think you might have touched on some of these in your slides, but maybe just to close out, how can managers effectively motivate and engage Gen Z employees?
Okay, that's what we've been actually talking about. It basically starts with understanding where they are coming from, listening to them, and prioritizing the things that make them, how will I put it now? Prioritizing what is priority. Will be unwise as leaders to actually dismiss the things that matter to the Gen Zs in the workplace and think that they are being too entitled or they are being too forward with their demands. So we need to now take a pause and actually listen and see what we can do as much as possible that suits to our organization. Sorry.
Sorry, can somebody just
LB.
Also seen foreign reserves going up, and I can assure you, within the next 1 or 2 months,
I think that's from LB's microphone.
See the dollar rate.
Is it just from my end? I'm having some.
Yes, I've muted him.
Interference.
Thank you, Paul. Sorry, maybe you can continue.
Okay, so just to wrap up my last response, so it's basically trying to prioritize and not dismissing what is important to them, and see how your organization can work around it by making things work. Being more intentional, knowing now that it is very important and your organization can only remain relevant and retain your workforce if you crack this code on dealing with Gen Zs in the workplace. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you very much, Mmeme. Ladies and gentlemen, as we close out, I do want to thank Mmeme and Racheal for this morning's insightful session. And thank you also to everyone that joined this morning.